Hello, welcome to this live webinar. My name is Tom Stone. I'm editor of TTI, and this webinar is in association with Miovision. Here with me is Brian Hoeft, who is Miovision's Director of Customer Advocacy and Relations. But Brian actually has a wealth of experience across the transportation industry. He served for a decade as Las Vegas's director of Las Vegas's FAST, Freeway and Arterial System of Transportation. So Brian has some really in-depth public sector experience, as well as his private sector experience, and his in-depth knowledge of technology and some of the new technologies, connected vehicle technologies, data analytics that are being used today. And he's been involved in deploying them, as well as in developing them. So his understanding is deep. He even has some experience in Washington, D.C. At the US DOT. So he has some knowledge of the workings there, which will come into play, because part of this webinar is to look at some of the funding opportunities, particularly in the USA, but also looking at, as the title is, using AI, Nearmiss Data and 5G to save lives and deploy funding effectively. Looking at some of this technology and AI, artificial intelligence. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, it seems, in the last few months. But it's not, it's not just for ChatGPT for writing things for you. It can do, dare I say it, perhaps more useful things than that, and has been around perhaps a little bit longer than people have been talking about it. Miovision have been developing this for a couple of years, and at least, and it's now sort of becoming extremely useful. So before I hand over to Brian, I should just say we're going to try and do this in a little bit of a sort of chat format. Brian and I will be having a bit of a conversation, with Brian leading with his expertise, of course, but me perhaps interjecting. And you as the audience, please do feel free to interject yourselves. There is a Q&A tab you should see on your screen. You can ask a question at any time. It won't appear immediately until we publish the question, but we will, rest assured, we will see it, and we'll try to keep an eye on that so questions can come in at any time. And we, of course, have the traditional questions at the end as well, where often people like to ask questions at the end. But feel free anytime to put a question in. And just to say that this will be available on demand afterwards, should you miss any of it or wish to share it with your colleagues. So I think that's all from me for now. I'll hand over to Brian to tell us a bit more about AI and why that's important, and where we can take that now with the funding opportunities that are available in the US and indeed around the world.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. Maybe we'll call this Chat B and T for Chat Brian and Tom. How's that sound?
I like that.
Okay, cool. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for taking a few minutes out of your time to spend time with us. And we're going to dive right into this. This isn't a death by PowerPoint. There are like 9 slides. Each slide will resonate around a key theme, and we'll talk to it. The first half of the deck is going to focus kind of at the programmatic level. It's always important to take all of the technology, but align it with programs, align it with opportunities, align it with funding, see how it can play in the world of the public sector and the private sector, but ultimately to deliver the best results. And although we are speaking to an international audience, this is going to have a lot of focus on North America. Partly because in North America, particularly the United States, crashes, fatals, and serious injuries are a big problem. There's around 43,000 people dying on US roadways every year, and that needs to come to an end. The US DOT is definitely going all in on this effort. Tom says I'm from Vegas, so I may drop in a few gambling terms here and there, but we're going all in. There's a lot of money coming. With money comes great responsibility, comes great opportunity. It also pushes us a little bit, because with so many programs, so many activities going on, it may spread people a little bit thin, and people are going to have to step up real quickly with their capabilities. But technology provides an opportunity to leverage that. So I'm going to move on to the next slide and just kind of talk from a high level from the U.S. perspective. So over on the left there, you see the DOT's seal for Department of Transportation. But safe system approach is something that is internationally recognized. And it is a shift from, kind of the traditional textbook engineering of making roads wide, making them efficient, allowing travelers to move fast. So take a look at the words on the circumference. A lot of us are engineers, so I can use big words like circumference. Then let's also talk about the wedges in the pie there. If you're in the middle there, notice that 4 of those wedges start with the word safer: people, vehicles, speeds, and roads. As transportation engineers, a lot of times we focus on the road side of things. And people, vehicles, speeds, they aren't taken for granted, but the idea is to design roads, have the proper lane widths, have the proper clearances at intersections, different things like that. That's important, but we're moving away from just the roads. So it's important to take that into account. On the outside, let me call out a few things. There's 2 that emphasize humans. We make mistakes and we are vulnerable. And in a road that has high speeds, that can be a problem. Responsibility is shared. It's shared amongst the policymakers, potentially the designers and the standard designs that they have to adhere to. But it's also shared by the vulnerable road users. It's tragic when a vulnerable road user is involved in a fatal or a serious injury crash. But were they wearing dark clothing? Were they making decisions that were poor? But at the same time, did they have a decent opportunity to make a safe crossing? Redundancy is important. Proactiveness is important. But safe. I would say those are the key things on this slide.
So the safe system approach is becoming a very well-known theme in the industry, and a well-known approach, which I think started in the USA, but certainly here in Europe, in the UK, the safe system approach is one of those phrases that is used more and more, and vital, really, I think, as we're going forward with it.
Yeah, and I'm watching over here in the Q&A, and I love this comment by Ellen. She says, let's think of humans as valuable rather than vulnerable. We have to realize the vulnerability, but I love that use of that word valuable. So we're definitely all in with that one.
Yeah, and that also, we don't have to change the acronym then. It can still be VRUs.
That's right. Or if we want to get a little wonky, we could say V squared RU. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. A big activity, again, still a little bit of US, North America centric, is we have a large law that was enacted a little under 2 years ago, the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Bipartisan means that, believe it or not, there was good agreement between our politicians on both sides of the aisle. Republicans and Democrats got together and said, we need this investment in our infrastructure. We need our infrastructure to be safe. We need it to serve all users. It needs to be equitable, not just cater to the well-off. We need to think about global challenges such as climate change, sustainability, things like that. We also need to think about it in terms of the economic competitiveness. I would say economic competitiveness is a new term for talking about congestion. In the past, we wanted to alleviate or reduce congestion. And if there's congestion, obviously that impacts the competitiveness, but that's getting more and more of the emphasis. But we're going to definitely focus on safety here. So the DOT has begun this program called Safe Streets for All. And there's a lot of great material here that the feds are putting out. My slide right here shows the page covering the 2022 awards. Now, believe it or not, with these awards, which were announced in February, over half of the United States population was represented in one of these awards. There were over 500 awards made. Most of them were made for something called an action plan. And an action plan is kind of the foundational component of this Safe Streets for All program. It's critical for its success. and it's a process-oriented set of actions. So you definitely need to have an action plan. But in addition to the action plan, we can't just have plans, because a lot of times plans go to die in PDF folders and on the bookshelves and so forth. These action plans need to lead to informed decisions. And before you maybe do a full-scale deployment of a safety countermeasure, you want to do some demonstrations or some pilots or some proofs of concepts. So you want to take care of that. Another thing to note here, there's a few key points that I'm going to throw out here on this slide, and then I'm also going to recap some of them at the end of the document. I would also put this out that with so much going on with the Safe Streets for All program, please feel free to reach out to myself, to others at Miovision, or to others who you deal with, whether it's in the public or private sector. We're available to do a lot of the work here for you, dive into the details, get those answers. There's too many rabbit holes to chase for the short time we have right now, but we do want to be aware of some key points. So one thing I'll emphasize here is that, again, as you can see on the screen, on February 1, announcements were made for over 500 awards. Just 2.5 short months later, in the middle of April, the announcement was made to start submitting for the 2023 awards. For the 2022 awards, just over $800 million in funding was allowed. The feds wanted to allocate $1 billion in funding, but based on what came in and where the state of the practice is, they were able to allocate $800 million in funding. That other money that wasn't used for 2022 rolls over to 2023. But where I'm also going with this is a very quick turnaround. You get an award, say in February, a new announcement comes out in 2020 for the 2023 award, and you see some things in that new announcement that you want to do, because the feds are being very nimble. Secretary Pete Buttigieg said, we're only 1 year into this program. He said this back in March. We are learning along with you, but we are going to make changes and adjustments to make this as effective as possible. But I'm going to go to a very key point right now, which is, let's say that you received an award for an action plan. You might have received a couple $100,000 up to $1 million or so for this particular action plan. Now for the 23 notice, they are actually calling this planning and demonstration, not action plans. Action plans are part of the new 23 program, but now they emphasize this idea of not just planning, but starting to demonstrate. And so now this starts to get agencies wondering, hey, I just received this award, but I want to start doing demonstrations. Can I have my 2022 award and also qualifier for a 2023 award? What do you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, so if you've got an award, you've already applied for awards, does that mean you can apply for another one? Do they overlap? What's the deal there?
Yeah, and obviously there is a lot of overlapping here. So that the calendar for announcements and applications, we're speaking in months. Once you get that award from 2022, you have something called a grant agreement that you have to develop along with the federal agencies. That grant agreement does take time. It does take a number of months. So the concern out of the gate when people got their February awards, and I saw this firsthand at various meetings. I saw agencies talking with federal representatives from their states, and both people were spot on with their discussion. But the agency said, hey, we don't want to just lose a couple of years in the cycle planning. We want to be able to demonstrate. So I'm going to read this, quote this from the DOT frequently asked questions page. This is where I found it. And the concern was, I have an award. Now I'm in this grant agreement process, which is going to take a long number of months, but I want to be able to apply for this next round of funding. What they say, what the feds respond is, FY22 applicant recipients who intend to establish grant agreements would have plans that qualify as being in progress. So if you have a plan that is in progress, an action plan that is in progress, you haven't completed it, but you're in progress, you can apply for this next new round of funding, even if you're still in the grant agreement and process. And pretty much every agency that got that February award is in the grant agreement process. But if you intend to do that, then by all means, you can go in this direction.
That's fantastic news, isn't it? It's unusual that public funding will be at this level, and so much of it almost like a waterfall of funding that's one after the other. So I'm sure it's not going to last forever, but this is a very special time, I suppose, isn't it? And it's a sort of once in a generation funding opportunity, and so it's important, isn't it, to make the most of this and fully understand it as it happens.
Right, and it's very important, when we bring into the politics, the people who voted for this law, we're coming up on an election year in a year or so. They need to go back to their constituencies and say, yes, we do tax you to travel on the roadways, but the money is being put to good use. And the bureaucracy exists. It can be very frustrating, but it exists to protect the taxpayer. It exists to protect the agency. It exists to make sure that we get the best products out of these significant investments. Over $5 billion US is being put into this particular program over the next several years. And it's exciting, but there's also a lot of responsibility there as well. So I'm going to move on. I would definitely want to watch the clock and not have to rush through the last slides. I've been focusing quite a bit on the North America, US perspective. We recognize that other regions and continents throughout the globe are practicing safety strategies. Places like Europe are very advanced in their capabilities, but they still see the need for the plans. Other parts of the globe, which are coming up in their development, this is an opportunity for them to share in what's being done in places like Europe and the US to apply some of those things. And as the world becomes more and more digitalized, that allows for things to be more and more efficient. So for example, Miovision being a Canadian-based company, the big telecom company up in Canada is TELUS, TELUS. So we work with them quite a bit. We have a few good discussions that are on our webpage where you can see us talking with some of their key people. This is where I want to speak a little bit to the 5G side of things. I also want to bring out the acronym MEC, or MEC, Multi-Access Edge Compute. So when we think of 5G, our phones can stream our videos. They can stream all the things we want to do on social media and share everything with our friends, families, loved ones, and stuff like that. But when you talk about MEC, or multi-access edge computer, one of the key words in there is the word edge. And in the transportation engineering, edge means we're getting right to the intersection. And the intersection is a key place where all the valuable and vulnerable people try to coexist with the fast-moving vehicles there. And then the idea is latency. Can we, in sub-seconds, communicate between the infrastructure, with the vehicles, with the different travelers, so that something can happen in that split second to prevent a serious tragedy? So the 5G and everything that's going on there is a big part of what's going on, and it's starting to see some deployments and some manifestations and such like that.
Absolutely, the 5G being for the sort of longer distance communication of this important information, but like you say, the edge is so important for that really super low latency functionality that's needed to really improve safety.
All right, so one more kind of high level item before we then move on to talking a little bit more about the near misses, but the whole idea of speeds, and as is demonstrated through research, through studies, and kind of common sense. The faster the conflicts, the more serious the injury and such that's going on. But at the same time, so much of our culture is focused on speed and efficiency, getting to places as quickly as possible. This document by the Institute of Transportation Engineers takes that into account. Just from some personal experience at cities like the Las Vegas region and other places, they want to do things like change the roadway environment to encourage slower speeds. But when a road is already 3 lanes in each direction with wide lanes and posted speeds of 45 miles per hour, but it's easy to drive 50 miles per hour or faster, that creates a challenge. And when you try to take that away, when you try to make a road slower or do something to the cross section, the environment to make it less easy to drive as fast, a lot of resistance can come from there. And sometimes the public isn't ready to take on that. You almost have to get the public more accustomed and aware of the seriousness of these crashes. And this goes back a little bit to the action plan that is part of that Safe Streets for All grant program. To qualify as an action plan, one of the things that you need to have is a leadership commitment. So the leadership, whether it's the head of a key regional agency or the head of a Department of Transportation, or it's an elected official, they have to be on record and they have to be in front of the public emphasizing the seriousness of this problem. And as that leadership persona and such becomes more and more, as more of an awareness occurs with that, as the media, as the public becomes aware of that, they can become more receptive to want to do something with the speeds.
Yeah, and then is there a part of that evidence is required as well? Evidence for the fact that these lower speeds are making a difference to safety.
Yeah, and I think, evidence definitely is there, but sometimes, people can be a little bit blind to the evidence. We're a little bit, I don't know if spoiled is the right word, but it's so easy and convenient to get from point A to point B. And when that gets inhibited by, say, a speed reduction, even though the evidence is there, that can be a problem. But that's also where not just speed, but combine that with, all users, combine that with the idea that, how equitable is everything? There are a lot of people out there who, don't benefit from the speed things that are going on. And they are actually those vulnerable and valuable people who we need to take care of. But again, that has to come through the leadership, and that has to be transmitted through, say, different forms of media, print media, televised media, town halls, different things like that. I think, again, it can happen. It will happen. It's consistent with what the federal government in the U.S. is doing with these programs. They're becoming more nimble on how they allocate these funds and run their processes so that everything can be deployed efficiently. It's a challenge that can be overcome. It can't be taken for granted, and it will take work. And a lot of it gets into that advocacy side of things.
Just an observation from a UK perspective, 20 mile per hour zones there's a lot of them now. In all major cities, it seems are having their own 20 mile per hour zones in the central cities, and they were pretty unpopular to start with. But I guess, like all these things, it takes a few brave people or mayors or traffic managers to start doing it, and then people get used to it. And then actually now, I don't think really now, a few years down the line, 20 mile per hour zones are quite such a big deal. People have come to expect them, so they just become a thing. So that's just a personal observation. I don't know if everyone else would hold that same view, but that's how I feel anyway.
There's always going to be that first crashing of the wave when something new and bold is presented, but then it goes into place and you don't just read the reports anymore. You see evidence that, hey, this is actually working. I'll call out a project here in Las Vegas near the university, UNLV, where they are making the whole key corridor on the east side of the campus much more multimodal friendly for pedestrian crossings and businesses and such. And you're just learning as a traveler that, hey, once I get into this block, I will travel more slowly, but you're going to also see the benefits there. You're going to see more people out of their vehicles, happy, smiling faces, and just a nice sense of community. And that's one of those qualitative awards that happen as well. Absolutely. All right, so let's talk now a little bit about the analytics. Let's talk about near misses. Let's get into the technical side of this. a little bit. So remember, we're coming up by the end of this calendar year of having about $2 billion worth of money deployed to do safety studies, demonstrations, implementations, so on and so forth. And you do need that good set of data. Traditionally, and still fairly commonplace for doing a safety assessment, is to go look at a past historical list of crashes. The US DOT.
This is the sort of pre-AI landscape, as it were.
It's the pre-AI landscape. And again, this is part of that transition where when we have something in place, even though there are benefits to making that change, the change is tough to come by. So, we got to help each other along there. And, not to totally sour on historical assessments and things like that. There is a lot of value there. But there are also some challenges that we need to be aware of. There may be limited things that are told. There may be they may be more reactive as opposed to proactive. So we want to be aware of that. So let's talk a little bit about the near miss proactive side of things. I may come back to this slide I just went back from, but let's talk about Nearmiss Analytics. And I am going to speak to work that we are doing at Miovision. We recently, earlier this year, acquired a company called Microtraffic based out of Winnipeg up in Canada. Craig Milligan is the founder and the leader of that company. That has now become the Miovision Safety Studies products. And it relies on artificial intelligence overlaid on cameras. And based on the technical characteristics of cameras, many of the cameras that you may have out there in your deployment could work with this system. Miovision has a very nice suite of cameras, whether it's our Scout Explorer and other Scout products or our SmartView 360. A lot of artificial intelligence can be collected from those images, and then we get into this Nearmiss Analytics. So imagine the old school way of trying to collect data at an intersection like this. And this is a good looking intersection. Look at everything that's going on there and everything that's been done to take care of all the travelers there. I mean, what do you see in that picture, Tom?
Well, we've got the segregation here with the bike lanes, and indeed, several bicyclists there and pedestrians, different types of vehicle. We've got the bus, we've got the car, and the multiple directions of traffic as well. So there's a lot going on, and it looks like it's been reasonably well designed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe a little bit of the paint could be freshened up, stuff like that. The other thing that we see on there are those green little indicators that are tracking every piece of movement that is occurring in that intersection. So to get into the near miss analysis, you do need to have a scientifically proven and capable process. And down on the lower left of the slide, you can see a lot of the key factors that go into that level of analytics. There has to be a speed conflict. Sometimes there's a metric used, PET, post encroachment time. What's the time between somebody who just vacated a spot where that next vehicle is going to cross? But at the same time, let's say that you have a couple of pedestrians who are en route to have a collision. It's probably not going to be too serious, just given the small magnitude of speed there. But think of it in terms of a pedestrian or a bicyclist coming into conflict with a vehicle that's speeding through there. Think of it in terms of a vehicle traveling through northbound and potentially coming into contact with a southbound vehicle that's making a left turn. There's a lot going on there. The impact angle is very important. Is it a potential head-on collision, a T-bone, something like that? Again, obviously the temporal and spatial separation is important. The user type and their vulnerability, and then the order of interaction. What happened there first? So with the artificial intelligence, with the right type of equipment, such as the camera system, this data can be collected and then it can be pushed into the cloud. And then through a combination of artificial intelligence and still some human involvement, you start to come up with a calculation of what we'll call the near misses.
because this is where AI is really, really pretty good, is as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but predicting things that might happen in the future, and like just by taking existing data and then like extrapolating it out and being okay, well, this is where an accident might happen in the future, and that's sort of one of its capabilities. Am I right in that?
That is, and that's kind of where this whole idea is going in this presentation. So let's talk about conflicts, and let's talk about actual crashes. So a conflict, we'll use that as another word for near miss. Fortunately, something missed by inches or feet or meters or whatever it is, and it was a near miss, it was a conflict. It had virtually all the attributes of being a crash, except for maybe fate. Fate was on somebody's shoulder that day, and it didn't turn into that fatal or that serious injury. This data can identify everything that is going on with those conflicts, and then those conflicts can be aligned with particular countermeasures, solutions. And the countermeasures don't necessarily have to be major overhauls of the intersection. And I'm going to go back to the whole Safe Streets for All program. When the applications are submitted, one of the criteria, at least for this new round in 2023, is can you demonstrate in your application that you're doing things such as significantly reducing fatals and serious injuries for all users? When you start to collect this type of data, and this data is scalable and repeatable, and it can be used with permanent fixtures of cameras. The Scout equipment that we offer at Miovision is actually a portable camera that can be taken out to a place that doesn't have the fixed cameras, raise the pole up 21 feet, get the images, push them into the cloud, do the analytics, and get some solutions that way. So you don't have to wait for the big infrastructure improvements to come into play. You don't have to go out and lay conduit, fiber, things like that. This data can be collected fairly quickly. So this obviously... Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry. I was just seeing a question coming in from Amadou here, which says, which sensor technologies are you using for near-miss analysis? Which you're talking about here, traffic cameras. Is it feasible with LiDAR? Which data you're interested in collecting from sensors?
Yeah, so a sensor, whether it's a video or a LiDAR or some other realm in the spectrum, is available. The emphasis right here is on cameras. And I've had experience with the LiDAR and the other methodologies, and they are very capable. They are very important. But also a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can take images like this, and an image that I'll show you on my next slide, and not only communicate the numbers, but you can show the actual things that are going on. And you can do it securely. You can do it with privacy in mind. Things can be blurred out, license plates, faces, things like that. But you can still have that picture tell you a story in a way that we already understand. So the focus for these few minutes that we're talking is definitely on the visual analysis. And then the artificial intelligence that we have developed works with our camera suite, but we also publish, what are the requirements if a different camera needs to be used? Because, obviously we need to solve the problem. This is a very good way to solve the problem, and it can't be, it needs to look at the technology. It can't be totally discriminating on which camera you use, but we know that our camera suite at Miovision is very capable for doing this.
Peter Strikemold asks, is this system able to distinguish between vehicles with or without automation, and if it is on or off?
That's something I'm very happy to get back to you. My out-of-the-pocket answer right now would be that capability is limited, but those are things that could certainly be looked at.
Yeah,
and I think that's where we're going. If it's not happening to full capability right now, tune in down the road in the not far too distant future, and we will likely see that. And I think that would also align with things that are going on, say, at the edge with the 5G and the MEC, where a vehicle could communicate to the infrastructure, here I come, and yes, I have automation, and it is fully activated, and I'm reading a book sitting in the passenger seat, and that's what was going on. So stay tuned for that for sure.
Ellen asks, I think this is possibly where we're going now. Is the aim of identifying near-miss situations to show where infrastructure improvements are needed?
Yeah, I think I just Venmoed him some money to ask that question, because now we're going to go talk about that. So let's go to the next slide and let's talk about that. So here's another example from taking some data from the artificial intelligence. And this would also be another plug for the video analytics, because when there is a critical or a high level near miss, such as represented in those orange and red bars, and I'll speak to that in just one moment, that video can also be made available. So in this case, the vehicle turning left probably had a permissive left turn, took a little bit of a chance there with the white vehicle coming there, and that qualified as a near miss. So what happened at this particular intersection is that the image recording was done for a number of days. I think around 72 hours, give or take, is a standard time frame that is used for this. At this particular intersection, they calculated near misses for all the types of turning movements between vehicles. And I'll speak to the other users in a moment. But left turns, through movements, and right turns. The big conflict at this particular intersection was with the left turns. And with those 4 bars, those are the 4 directions of travel: a northbound with a southbound left, an eastbound with a westbound left, so on and so forth. So you can see that the one on the left did have the highest number of high and critical near misses. So now this data has just fell into your lap. One of the great things about using a system like this is that a lot of times 80% of an engineer, a traffic engineer's job, is to go out and collect data. And a lot of times they're not collecting data that is as rich and timely as this type of data. And then 20% of the time is spent doing the things that the engineers were trained for and got their engineering licenses for, which is to come up with the solutions and design the solutions and operate and deploy the solutions. So you have this situation here. This also speaks to the emphasis from the feds. They want solutions that are low cost and high impact. Impact not being the impact that we just avoided here, but the impact being that now we totally avoid or seriously or significantly reduce these types of impacts. So think of kind of that quick turnaround of countermeasures in the categories of intersection calming, signal operations, or small redesigns. I'll focus on signal operations here. So in this case, maybe throughout the day or during times of day, they need to get rid of that permissive left turn. You got to get into a protected left turn. Now, what that means is the vehicles that want to turn left will have to wait a little bit longer. They may have to wait an extra minute or two for the cycle to come around to give them that left turn. But that is being done in the eye of safety. Now, if you drift back in time, maybe that wasn't, safety is always first and foremost, but maybe it wasn't emphasized the same way as it is now, and a decision was made. We know that there's a little bit of risk there, but for efficiency and other reasons, we're still going to offer that permissive turn. Now we're entering this era where, we're just going to have to be okay with protected turns instead of permissive turns. But getting this type of data, being able to do this analysis, these are the sorts of things that are becoming capable, and they align very nicely with everything that is being put out, whether it's in the US or other parts of the globe.
Talking about data, there's a couple of questions here actually from Anne-Marie Brown, who asks, how many classifications of vehicles does this include, and does it do head counts? And also, sort of supplemental to that, who owns the data that is collected?
Right. So there are a number of vehicle classifications, whether it's the motorized vehicles and it's trucks, buses, smaller vehicles, pickups, SUVs, different things like that. That data we can definitely make available. And I encourage, at the end of the deck, the contact information will be out here, and we definitely would love to follow up with you. I mentioned it briefly, and I want to highlight it here. This particular example does not get into the peds, the bicyclists, the other travelers, but this same type of analysis is available for the pedestrians and the bicyclists. So just imagine on this screen that instead of that white vehicle going through, it was going to make a right turn. And imagine that there was a pedestrian who was also going to cross the street in that same direction of traffic. there is a good chance that the pedestrian may be unaware of the vehicle making a right turn. The right turning vehicle may not be paying attention to the pedestrian, and a conflict or a crash could occur. So that can also be tracked at this level of detail. And a solution could be something called a LPI, a leading ped interval. That means that when the light would normally turn green for the vehicle to go through or make the right turn, the light for the vehicle actually stays red. The ped crossing signal comes up, the little walking person comes up, and then the pedestrian gets a head start for 3 to 5 seconds. The pedestrian gets a chance to own and control the intersection. They become more high visible, and then that conflict can be reduced. Another thing that will happen with this, I'll speak to it here, but again, we got plenty of more details and examples that we can share with you and spend time with you on, is that I'm talking about the analysis on this slide pre-countermeasure. So let's say that the agency came in, changed some signal timing, did some intersection calming, did a small redesign, such as some lane width changes, put up some bollards, better signing, maybe improve the pavement markings. Let's do that. That only takes a matter of weeks, month or so at the worst case. Maybe with signal timing, it can be done instantaneously. If you got a nice comm network to your control center, go out, change protected to permissive and do some stuff, but then run the visual analytics again. And you are more than likely going to see a lot of that orange go away, a lot of that red go away. It may not completely go away, but those columns are going to get shorter. And they will also be compared to the thresholds and the baseline. What would be a normal rate of conflict between the different movements that occur at intersections? Is your intersection behaving at levels that are above the normal thresholds, but then you make a countermeasure, a nice quick countermeasure, you deploy it, you measure it, and all of a sudden you're golden. So lots of fun opportunities there. And then your ratio of 80% data collection, 20% analysis is down to 5-10% data collection and 90 to 95% putting in these countermeasures and scaling it out and hitting all the different cities and places that are starting to dive into this with the programs that are out there.
That's great. And is there a question of ownership of the data? Does that stay with Miovision? Is it the customer's data, or is it just anonymized? I suppose it is always anonymized, but
the anonymization is very important. The ownership, there is ownership that definitely lies with the customer. There's a lot of details in the contract that spell out different criteria for that. But if you signed up and collected the data and paid for the data, it definitely is your data. And then what we also like to do is, work with you to have success at your initial deployments, but, then scale it out throughout your community and then share it with the rest of the world. Show, hey, these are great things that are happening. And again, obviously this is a Miovision focused presentation here, but with all the funding and the awards and the opportunities going out there, there's a lot that we can all learn from each other. There's enough room in the pool and the ocean for everybody to bring their different characteristics there. So there may be obviously some direct competitiveness from time to time, but there's great opportunities for collaboration, and we bring certain niches that others may not bring, but we learn from that. But ultimately, we're moving toward that safer and efficient and equitable transportation system. So I am carefully watching the clock. This is my last content slide, and I've already alluded to this a little bit. There are some great peer-reviewed research documents out there. This is a document, Craig Milligan, again, the founder of Microtraffic, now part of our Miovision family, was one of the authors there. It was published and presented at the Transportation Research Board, which is one of the most iconic research-focused activities that happen in North America. But when they got into all their fancy regression analysis and calculations and stuff, that the validation between the conflict and the crash was at 94%. You are pretty much spot on having the data you need from the near miss conflict information to then make a decision about what to do to avoid the crashes. You get the great risk reduction there. And then the 36 times faster, the way that is calculated is that, kind of in that traditional historical way of going out. And let's say that you made some intersection modifications after you collected some data. Then you need some time to determine, did it work? And a lot of times agencies and professionals and academics are saying, we need 1, 2, 3 years worth of data to confirm that we made a difference. 3 years is the same as 36 months. But at the same time, imagine going out there after you've made some of those low dollar, high impact solutions and running the analytics again. You may have a credible and valid determination within a month that you have made improvements. So that's where you get that 36-to-1 factor. So that is the contact. Here is contact information for Miovision. Here is my email address. And let's, I don't know, Tom, what are some key takeaways that you have? And then I still have a
key takeaways. We've got tons of questions as well. I'm sorry I didn't get all to the questions, but I mean, we can perhaps rattle through some questions quick fire.
And we can certainly follow up with the people and the questions.
We can follow you with follow-up direct. We'll make sure we'll keep that email address there on the screen for a little bit while we wrap up. Do please feel free to email Brian with any questions that we didn't get to. But I mean, my key takeaways from the presentation as a whole is first and foremost, I suppose, the importance of deploying these new technologies to improve safety, and which circles back to the start where we talked about the safe system approach, which is the guiding light, the North Star for transportation deployment around the world now, I think, and it should be, first and foremost, let's make it safe. How are we going to make it safe? We have new technologies at our fingertips now that can really help us to do that by not just being reactive and saying, oh, there was an accident, maybe there's something wrong here, but actually using AI to predict where these accidents are going to happen, and fixing the roads, making the roads safer before they do, and heading towards that vision zero target, and what better time really, I suppose, should say, to be talking about this, particularly in the USA with the funding that is available there now, and various different funding opportunities which you were able to speak about then, and we did have a few specific questions on coming through. So please do put them straight to Brian. He is something of an expert in that area, as well as the technology. So I think that's sort of my summary of what we've been over there. And I mean, we do have a few other questions, but we should probably wrap up before too long. But how are you coming away from this now, Brian?
Yeah, I want to reemphasize one thing and then make a couple of other points. I want to reemphasize again what is in the frequently asked questions section of the Safe Streets for All grant. And again, paraphrase it as your 2022 action plan is considered to be in progress if you intend to establish a grant agreement. And again, grant agreements do take time. If you got your announcement in February 1 and you're Speedy Gonzalez, maybe you have that grant agreement in place, but it's likely that there still is time that is required to complete that grant agreement. But if you intend to...
Yeah, sorry, I wonder if that circles back to a question that did come in earlier that I didn't get to, which John Abraham asked, does that apply for 2023 implementation grants too?
My reading of this is, and let's quickly classify the different types of funding that come from this program. There's the action plan, and then within that action plan, there's supplemental planning and demonstration activities. That's all part of the quote unquote action plan suite of activities. There's something completely separate called implementation plans. If you qualified for an implementation plan, and that was rare in the first award. The first award had like 37 out of 511 that were able to do implementation plans. That meant that they already had their action plans in place and they qualified for that. So my read on this is that you need to be further along with your action planning before you can qualify for an implementation plan. But I do believe that it's really nice that you can indicate, hey, I'm in the grant agreement process through no fault of my own. It does take time, but I intend to complete it. But that does make you eligible to go after the funding that is going to be. The deadline there is July 10. I'll make one quick point here is that a lot of times when we think about these federal grants, we think of 30 plus page documents that are very challenging, and then only maybe 10 to 30 or so awards are made for much higher dollar amounts. You know, the fact that already half of the US has received funding for some sort of Safe Streets for All program in 2022 speaks a lot to it. The application process is fairly straightforward. In 2022, if you wanted an action plan, you were limited to writing 300 words. You don't necessarily need somebody to come in and help you write those 300 words. There's a good chance you can do that. And don't do it on ChatGPT. Do use it with your own activity there. They've expanded that slightly for the 2023, but they still have, in some cases, limitations of just 2 pages. And so while we're certainly capable and offer help in doing these sorts of things, I want to transition to another part of the frequently asked questions. And somebody said, we have determined that we need to procure a contractor. Now what do we do? So, a lot of times you might think that, you got to have your arrangements between the public and private sector prior to submitting an application. But contracting costs are not, for the most part, even eligible to be incurred until that grant agreement is complete. So if you're working on your grant agreement and you're moving toward the finish line, this is when you start to think a little more carefully about what are we going to do for the for our support from the private sector. We're starting to think a little bit more clearly about how we want to do things, or maybe just through a discussion like this, you are now aware of the opportunities to do some things with artificial intelligence and test out some of the product lines, such as what we offer. You don't have to have those arrangements with your private sector partners in place yet. And again, they can't be formally improved until your grant agreement is in place. So you definitely want to look at it from that perspective. And then my final comment would be that with this program being so critical, with it investing a lot of money and fairly straightforward to be selected, I think if you pay attention to the details in the application, don't do any mistakes that are obvious, and get your 2 pages in or whatever it is, that can be done. And there's a responsibility out there for the communities, for the agencies, for the profession. We have this great opportunity and we have a responsibility to use it. The feds are bending over backwards to make it as easy to do as possible, and respect the bureaucracy as much as possible, but get this stuff out there. But everyone needs to apply. Most people are going to be selected. We're only 2 years into 5 years. $5 billion is going to be out there. A lot of what we're talking about now is the low cost, high impact, and it's timely solutions. Imagine doing some things at these intersections and knocking out a few thousands of those fatals and serious injuries just by doing some of these solutions. Then we are definitely on that trajectory toward 0 deaths.
That's the destination that we all want to reach, and sometimes it feels like it's almost impossible. But I believe that we can get there, and then with the technology that's out there, it's possible. It's within our powers. So and this is a part of that. So
yeah, it's a great legacy to leave behind, whether individually and professionally, but also collectively, and for our fans and loved ones and the generations that are starting to, enter their careers and start their families and things like that.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a fascinating presentation, Brian. Thank you so much. And again, so I'm sorry, it was extremely popular. A lot of people in the audience, and so many questions coming through. So I am sorry we didn't get to all of them. But as I say, please do feel free to email Brian directly, and he will endeavour to get back to you. And that's where I think we should probably wrap up, because that was a great note to finish on, Brian. So. Thank you so much for your time and for your expertise.
Thank you. And we have a great team here at Miovision. The emails aren't just going to come to me and get lost or whatever. We're going to go after this in a real good and effective way, and be in contact and be responsive and do good things.
All kinds of experts there at Miovision to help. So fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian.
All right. Thank you.
We'll leave it there, but I will keep up with your work, and we'll keep reporting on it in TTI.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.